The soundtrack for Xenoblade Chronicles X on Nintendo Switch, Wii U, was written by Japanese composer Hiroyuki Sawano, which means if you have ever looked up the soundtrack for the game online, your experience probably went something like,
It's z5m20i12r04a28? I love this theme!
yeah! So, Hiroyuki Sawano is quite infamous for making these seemingly nonsensical track titles for his scores, and while they may seem like they have no meaning at first glance, there is a way to decipher and understand these titles. My name is Michael, and welcome to Quest Clear. Today, we will uncover the hidden meanings behind the track titles from the Xenoblade Chronicles X soundtrack. There are a few basic rules and concepts behind Sawano's titles which I'd like to explain before getting into the meat of things. The most important thing I feel I need to explain first is some basic information about Japanese script. This will be a really brief Japanese lesson, so just stick with me for a little bit. There are three primary writing systems in Japanese: hiragana, katakana, and kanji. Hiragana and katakana are fairly straightforward, so I'll focus on explaining kanji. Kanji are typically made up of smaller characters which function as sort of the building blocks of any particular kanji. These are called radicals. For the purposes of this video, what will be important to understand is that more complex looking kanji are usually made up of a combination of smaller radicals. And while some radicals can be written as individual kanji on their own, others exist solely as radicals. Kanji also typically have two types of readings, depending on the context they're used in: onyomi and kunyomi. As such, they can have multiple valid phonetic values which can be used as a form of wordplay. One such form of wordplay that Sawano often uses is goro awase, Japanese wordplay involving different phonetic readings of Japanese numbers. For instance, 39 can be read as sankyu or thank you in English. We can see Sawano use goro awase in the area theme for Sylvalum 46-9, which decodes to Shiro no Tairiku, or the White Continent in English. Sylvalum's theme is also an example of Sawano using different symbols that can be read in different ways. The colon, for instance, is read as tai in Japanese when reading out mathematical ratios. For instance, a ratio of 2 to 3 would be read as nitai-san in Japanese. Similarly, a hyphen can be read as no. Why? I don't really know. I asked a friend of mine and they said it kind of has the same meaning as the English word of, but they couldn't really explain why. In any case, it just kinda is, and I'm going to treat that as assumed knowledge moving forward, okay? These rules tend to be consistent across other projects Sawano has worked on. For instance, the Recreator soundtracks 2109-A8 RU Ken and AL:I Tsuyoku no Baruken and Arutaeru, illustrating instances of Sawano utilizing both goro awase and a hyphen and colon to spell out a track title. Finally, while this isn't a rule per se, it is important to understand that Sawano tends to like combining two entirely different songs into one track for album releases of his scores. Often, these will still have separate names for each half of the track, but will be separated by some symbols. This isn't always the case, but it will pop up a few times in this video. Some Sawano fans in the West have dubbed these double tracks, which is what I'll refer to them as going forward. Alright, hands up who knows what this means. A musical suite is a collection of pieces which are played in succession. It was a popular musical form in the Baroque era that was made up of movements in various dance styles. The most popular order of movements and which dance styles the suite consisted of differed depending on the time period and the country you lived in. As we now live in the 21st century, the suite form isn't quite the same as this, but video game composers have opted to use the term to classify the music they composed for the games they worked on. Examples of this include the Dragon Quest suites done by the late Koichi Sugiyama for each game that he's worked on, and Motoaki Takenouchi's symphonic suite The Another Story of Shining Force. You may have noticed that the first 11 tracks of the XenobladeX soundtrack are numbered from 1 to 11 within the titles themselves. This is because Hiroyuki Sawano has opted to classify the first 11 tracks of the Xenoblade Cross original soundtrack as an orchestral suite titled X, or Cross, I'm not actually sure. But it's not simply just theme X, it's number 2 equals theme X. In other words, theme X is the second movement of the orchestral suite X. Sawano's suite style categorization isn't unique to X either. Other examples of this title structure include his Blue Exorcist and Gundam Unicorn soundtracks. Now, let's take a look at the titles themselves. D is the second note in the C major scale, which corresponds to Re in the fixed do solfege notation. Using Godo Awase, 9 is Ku and 1 is I. Then we read the M as is, M. In Japanese, this gives us the word requiemu, or pronounced properly, requiem. Therefore, the title is number 4 equals requiem. In this instance, the hyphen represents the two kanji being joined as one word rather than the previously explained no sound. Kaku can be left as is, however we need to convert the west into kanji for the cardinal direction west, nishi. This kanji's onyomi reading is se, so we combine that with kaku to phonetically spell the word kakuse, which means awakening. The second half of this track, triangle star, I'm not reading this, can be explained by using kanji radicals. The character Ho is made up of 3 radicals, mountain and 2 moons. The triangle represents a mountain, while the 2 stars represent the 2 moon radicals. Yes, I know the moon technically isn't a star, but the Japanese word for star doesn't really make that distinction, so... In any case, we can read the word kai as is, and then using the onyomi of Ho, we can phonetically spell out the word Hokai, in English, collapse. Therefore, we get the title first half awakening, second half collapse. So you might be wondering, what could LP mean? That's just an abbreviation, right? It's nothing we have to decode, right? I don't know, if Nintendo didn't decide to change the name of a certain thing in the game for the English localization, maybe you would be able to know what this meant. And it wouldn't have taken me 7 years to figure out that the life hold is called the life point in Japanese. God LP is an abbreviation of life point, the Japanese name of what was localized as lifehold in the English version of the game. G low S is a weird way of spelling the word growth based on how it would be phonetically pronounced in Japanese. This, yet again, was changed in the English localization by NOA to ganglion. As for FSKO, this is actually something I have no clue what it's referring to. It's probably an abbreviation of some kind, but I have no clue what it is. So, if it's something from X itself, I would imagine it could yet again be something that was changed in the localization process. So, I'd like to open the floor to you guys watching this video to suggest something, anything. This is like one of 4 things on this track list I still do not understand, even 7 years later. So if you all have any ideas, please leave a comment. Also like the video, subscribe, I might do more videos on other Hiroyuki Sawano soundtracks in the future, so if you're interested... Anyway, that gives us the English title of number 7 equals Ganglion FSKO. The word "and" separates the titles for each half of this double track, so I'll tackle each half separately. Un in English is a prefix that means something is not. Japanese has a similar prefix for this, which is mi. The next part of this title is another instance of Sawano using symbols to represent kanji radicals. The up arrow literally represents the radical for arrow, while the second half can be left in Japanese as is. Combining these 2 radicals gives us the character chi. Put together with mi, we get the word michi, which means unknown. The second half of this title phonetically spells out the word kyodai, which means gigantic. That's it. Yeah. Mono X is an abbreviation of Monolith Soft X. For those who don't remember, X was the working title for the game when it was first revealed. I can tell you that CR17S is Crisis, using Godo Awase. I, however, cannot tell you what 19S8 means. It's likely still Godo Awase, but I've come up with many possible ways to decipher it, which I'll display on screen now, but none of them quite seem like they fit. If you have any ideas other than what's on screen right now, please leave a comment and explain your reasoning. I'd love to hear other ideas. In any case, number 10 equals Crisis 19S8. The second half of this track is a rearrangement of theme X. R is an abbreviation of the word arrange, and the X here refers to theme X. Thus, put simply, number 11 equals rearrange theme X. We are now done with the orchestral suite X, and all that's left on disc 1 are the vocal songs. All of the vocal songs on the soundtrack have titles in intelligible English or German. However, there is one vocal track on disc 1 which is not like that, and that is Nemosu hi Ous. Ne can be written in katakana, while mosu is a verb in Japanese that uses this kanji. Using these as radicals, we can derive kami, which, when combined with the following kanji, gives us the word shimpi. We can then leave our ous in English as a suffix to get the word mysterious, which is the title of the track. To cover my bases, the equivalent suffix of our ous here in Japanese would be teki, giving us the word shimpiteki, which consequently is how the title would be read in Japanese. And that brings us to the end of disc 1. Personally, I think these are among the most complex titles on the soundtrack, so if you've stuck around this long, I'm glad I was able to explain something. I hope my explanations were easy enough to follow along with, but if they weren't, feel free to leave a comment, and I'm happy to answer as much as I can. In any case, I hope Sawano didn't faceplant onto the keyboard while typing out disc 2. Disc 2. I'm pretty sure this is where most people look at the soundtrack and question Sawano's sanity, because, I mean, Z29/2T0T1L301E17 doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. However, I'm of the mind that these really are the simplest titles on the soundtrack to interpret. I'm sure most of you have seen these tracks written as, for instance, Z29 Battle. But that's also a bit of a simplification of what's actually going on here. Sawano actually explained this himself in an interview. They're a code. The Z5 and Z15 at the start of the titles are track numbers which I substituted myself. I received a list of all my music from the game's development staff, which had serial numbers for each of my tracks, like M1 and M2. I assigned these ID numbers myself, but for this soundtrack, I was combining two tracks into one. So, Z1 is the song that combines M1 and M2. With that sort of process, the Z plus digit parts are serial numbers I organized in my own style. All of the numbers that come after refer to the date we recorded or mixed the song. The remaining alphabet letters were the words on the list which indicated the scene the music was assigned to. It's worth noting that Sawano often uses an abbreviation or codename for tracks when he's mastering them for upcoming projects. For instance, R for Recreators, KD for Kingdom, and KK for Kortetsucho no Kabaneri. We could infer that the code was Z for Xenoblade. It's possible that this is where the title number 1 equals codename Z comes from, specifically referring to the code Sawano used for the game. Now, if we use this process to decode this track, for instance, we would get the result Field BGM with the song ID 15, made on the 14th of September 2012. Now that we know this, we can basically apply this process to every track that starts with a Z plus digit to understand what all of these titles mean. However, there are a few titles which will require a little bit of extra interpretation to understand properly. Z30, Z16, and Z23 are all victims of confusing Japanese romanization. The hurry in Z30 is most likely the Japanese word furi, which means disadvantages. Thus, the title translated would become Z30 Disadvantaged Battle. Z16's gurosu refers to the growth or ganglion, as explained earlier, while Z23's samaru refers to Samar or the Samarian race of the game. As for Z question mark, this is the only track on the soundtrack without a proper ID digit, which is probably due to it only containing one piece of music rather than it being a double track. However, it should be mentioned that Z7, Z16, Z29, and Z30 all contain one track, so it's likely that not every Z plus digit track was classified using the numbers on the menu like Sawano indicated during the interview. The last thing I'd like to add, although this is purely speculation on my part, is that any word with a B at the start of it represents a second version of a track to be used in any particular instance. My interpretation would be that Z39B Comical is the second track that was assigned to be used in a comical scene, and Z7B LP Arrange is another arrangement of Life Point, which also happened to be unused in the game, but you know what? At the very least, I'm hoping that this explanation clears up any confusion surrounding Disc 2's track titles. Really the easiest ones to understand in this entire soundtrack, which I can't say the same about Disc 3 is primarily made up of the field themes and a few of the boss themes of the game. The overall structure of every track title on this disc is roughly the same, whether we separate the Latin alphabet characters from the Japanese or we separate the lowercase letters from the uppercase. There really isn't anything that we haven't seen already, so I should be able to go through these pretty quickly. Primordius theme. Shuhen means circumference or area around. We could translate this as the area around NLA. What's also worth noting is that this track title got translated on the soundtrack USB included with the North American Special Edition of the game as ANRLEAA, which is a pretty literal translation of the Japanese title, all things considered. Separating things out, we get Night L Kikiki. Night is yoru in Japanese, while the L represents the English word light. Combining these kanji gives us the word yako, which means noctilucent in English. The three ki kanji represent radicals which make up the kanji mori, so the title means noctilucent forest. Coincidentally, the Japanese name of Noctilum is also Yako no Mori, which is basically what we got from decoding the title into Japanese. This track also has an official English title from the Special Edition USB, which once rearranged spells out Noctilum Forest. I'm convinced that Nintendo of America has a fully English localized Sawano tracklist hidden away in their deepest, darkest of vaults. Release the damn tracklist, you cowards! Hey, editing MB here. Just want to say I forgot about NLA Shigai on my script. So here's the decoding for it. I'm not going to go into it. It's pretty self-explanatory. Moving on. As with the last two tracks, this basically decodes to Oblivia's Japanese name. The two kanji at the start and end of the title are radicals which make up the character Bo, while the remaining kanji, Kyaku, can be left as is. Put together, we get the word Bokyaku. Then, Keikoku phonetically spells out the Japanese word for valley. The Japanese name of Oblivia is Bokyaku no Keikoku. Translated, Forgotten Valley. Well, sort of. Bokyaku also means consigning to oblivion, which is where the English name Oblivia likely comes from. Field Kaijo. Kaijo means surface of the sea. Spoiler warning in 3, 2, 1. Ares boss. I will never forgive Sawano for spoiling chapter 11 for me. This is the only title which kind of breaks convention for all the other area themes. It's just the word manon, but jumbled up. The @ sign represents the A, the 0 represents the O, and the dot at the end is the hyphen. The word manon has no hyphen in Japanese, so instead they used this dot symbol to separate the ma and the non. The plus indicates that the title is a combination of the letters M and N plus the characters A, O, and hyphen. We already discussed the Silverlim theme title earlier in this video, but Goro Awase means shi, ro, then no, kai, ri, and finally ku. This gives us Shiro no Tairiku, which means the White Continent in English. Cauldros is basically the same as Silverlim, where 96 gives us Kuro, which means black. The title is definitely Kuro no Tairiku, but I'm still not quite sure why the P at the end is Ku. The only thing I can think of is that it's a mirrored 9 for some reason. In any case, feel free to leave any ideas in the comments about the P, but Cauldros is also called the Black Continent in Japanese. Just like Aboress, this one is spoilery, so consider this your warning and chance to skip to the outro of this video. However, the spoilers for this one aren't very obvious unless you're familiar with the Japanese romanization. Separating things out, we get Rao Kimera Tarechiya. This doesn't really make sense at face value, but let me put this into how it would be spelled in English. Lao, Chimera, Telethi. And for those who've played the game, I don't think I need to say any more. And with that, we're basically done with the soundtrack. I think I've explained almost every track title for X in this video, but if there's anything I missed, or any corrections I've had to make after publishing the video, there's a link to a spreadsheet with the deciphered title of every track that we know of in the description. I plan to update this spreadsheet if I end up making videos on other Sawano albums in the future. So if you'd like me to do that, please consider subscribing to Quest Clear and maybe request which soundtrack you'd like me to cover next. If you can do that for us, then I'll consider it. I've been meaning to make this video for a few years now, so I'm quite happy to be finishing off this script. I figure it's the greatest tribute I could make to this game that has quite literally impacted my life, as cliche as it sounds. I don't think I would be composing music had I never encountered the soundtrack for Xenoblade Chronicles X. This video is being uploaded on the 7th anniversary of the game, so happy anniversary, Xenoblade Cross. Oh, and you might be wondering why I didn't talk about Disc 4. It's simple. BT stands for bonus track. That's it, I'm done. I'll see you next video. Hey everyone, welcome to the 1 minute outro where Owen and I chat until a 1 minute cut. How you doing, Owen?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
Pretty good. This video has been a pretty massive undertaking for me. I've been wanting to make it, I said this in the video, I've been wanting to make it for a few years now, but I had a lot of help with it. First, I want to thank ECLIPSE sound team. You guys are awesome. Thanks for letting me use your music in the video. They recently released their album Michi, which is pretty kino, lots of soul in there. So the link to the Bandcamp for that is in the description, so please check that out. Really good music. I'm serious. Do check it out. Also, thank you, Flyann, for letting me use your footage from your stream in this video. I think it really helped me drive home the point. And thank you, Max Galactica, for the footage of the USB, because I do not live in America. Anyway, Owen, how you doing?
Doing pretty good. Obviously this video came out